It was illegal what happened, but you know, the sympathies of everybody were with the princess when she did that. She did have literally this battle. There was another appalling incident I recall where there was actually some video being shot of her in a street, and she was running away from photographers. They were chasing after her, and you know, that was an appalling situation. Of course, the media needed Diana, and Diana needed the princess. And there's no getting away from that, but the thing had got completely out of hand and completely out of control. And I think, I've been saying this a lot this morning, but it will, I'm sure, be the case that there will be a great examination of what's happening in this area. We can't, well, I say we can't go on, can we? I don't think the mood of the public will allow the situation where the Princess of Wales, Diana, Princess of Wales, married for 15 years to the heir to the throne, the most popular member of the royal family perhaps that there's been for perhaps forever, should be hounded to death by press photographers. Just strikes me as a situation which most people would, in their worst nightmares, not imagine would happen, and will not be prepared to tolerate the situation going on much longer if there's any human thing that can be done to prevent it.
Well, it has already entered into the political world. The Foreign Secretary, Robin Cook, who was one of the first members of the cabinet to hear, he was of course awake in the Far East in the Philippines. He referred to the aggressive intrusion into her privacy and said that serious questions need to be asked. Now, too early to say what kind of form those questions will take.
Yeah, you know, this goes on and on. I have to say, I mean, a couple of years ago, the Queen, again, the Balmoral family holiday in Scotland, the Queen sent a letter to newspaper editors saying, please would you leave us alone. Well, that got ignored, you know. I mean, it is jolly difficult, this, but I think there is a feeling on both sides that what we don't want in this country is to bring in, you know, lots and lots and lots of new rules and laws without thinking through of the consequences. Nobody wants to stop the press, at least I hope nobody wants to stop the press doing the legitimate job of, first of all, bringing information about what is going on, but also rooting out wrongdoing when there is that. And it has to be said that her relationship with Dodi Fayed was bound to be a controversial one. And so results have been awful, though, haven't they?
Just interrupt you there, Nick. At churches across the country this morning, special prayers are being said for Diana, Princess of Wales, and her family. We can go live now to the ITV morning service at St Mary's Roman Catholic Church in Hamilton in Glasgow, where the Bishop of Motherwell, the Right Reverend Joseph Devine, is conducting a service.
And so first we ask the Lord to be close to her family, especially to the young princess, and to all who knew her and loved her. And now, for her, for them, and for all of us, we ask the Lord to forgive us our sins. Lord Jesus, you raise us to new life. Lord, have mercy.
Lord, have mercy.
Lord Jesus, you forgive us our sins. Christ, have mercy.
Christ, have mercy.
Lord Jesus, you feed us with your body and blood. Lord, have mercy.
Lord, have mercy.
May Almighty God have mercy on us, forgive us our sins, and bring us to everlasting life.
Amen.
The Right Reverend Joseph Devine there in Glasgow, conducting one of the many services across the country in remembrance of Diana, Princess of Wales. Well, Mark Webster joins us now from the ITN newsroom, where he's been monitoring the latest developments. Mark, what do you have for us?
Well, we've got tributes pouring in from all around. I mean, what we have heard is a number of football matches, for instance, have been postponed as a mark of respect. We've also got from around the United Kingdom, Viscount Tony Pandy, former Speaker of the House of Commons, who actually read the lesson at the marriage of Charles and Diana, who's in a very moving tribute said, "We've suffered a grievous loss because she was unique. No one ever contained so much compassion and care in one body." Also, Alex Salmond, the leader of the Scottish National Party, has said, and I think this perhaps sums up the controversial reputation she leaves behind, but he said she had enemies in the establishment, and perhaps in death they'll now accord her some of the respect and compassion which they refused her in life. We express our condolences to the family and friends of all the victims of this tragic accident. Also, the former Prime Minister Ted Heath, who's actually on a visit to the Chinese capital Beijing, said that the loss will be felt throughout the world. He said, "I have expressed my deepest sympathy on the tragic loss we've all suffered with the sudden and horrific death of Diana, Princess of Wales." Again, he says, the feeling of compassion and the feeling of loss will be felt throughout the world.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Well, Jonathan Dimbleby, whose biography of the Prince of Wales shed so much light on his marriage with Diana, joins us now from Bristol. Jonathan Dimbleby, through your dealings with the Prince, presumably you got to form a pretty good picture of Diana.
Well, not a full picture of her. My main knowledge, if I've met her once or twice, was the same kind of knowledge that most people have, a sense of a remarkable public figure who was greatly loved by millions of people, and someone for whom, therefore, a light has gone out. And I just, therefore, have the same feelings that nearly everyone else has about that.
But a complex character, an intriguing character, one that the press clearly couldn't leave alone.
It's clear that the press couldn't leave her alone, and from very early on that worried her, just as it worried the Prince of Wales. And the reason why the press couldn't leave her alone, of course, at one sense is obvious. She was a great star. She was also a significant figure in an important household. Whether or not the press exercised the restraint that they ought to have exercised is the question that you and others have been debating. My own feeling is that the Princess had an ambivalent relationship with the media. She was able to use it because she was a startling public figure to very great good for the causes that she believed in. But she was also a great star who was attracted to the media. And the relationship was therefore ambivalent. On the one hand, she wanted to have her privacy, understandably and rightly. On the other hand, she seemed to need the attention of the press as if to demonstrate to herself, to give her the confidence to believe that she was doing important public work. She was a fragile and complex person. But I have to say that at the moment, like everyone else, I imagine, my feelings are with her close family and as an ordinary individual with her children and with the father who has to cope with this appalling tragedy in their lives.
Jonathan, after the divorce, was the Princess out on a limb, as it were, or did the Prince still offer her support and guidance?
I think the most important thing that is clearly observable is that what many parents find very difficult after a divorce, which is to bring up the children and put the children first, they accomplished. Not easy to do when they were both living public lives under a great scrutiny. They put their children in that sense first. They were able to agree and to, in harmony, organise the upbringing. And that was in the knowledge that both had that the children loved both of them very much. So to that extent, I answer your question. There's much debate about whether she was or wasn't ostracised. My own view is, for what it's worth, is that everyone around her who knew her wanted her, A, to be happy. I know that the Prince of Wales himself longed for her happiness, although they'd been through very difficult times and the marriage had collapsed. He wanted her to be happy, he wanted her to fulfil herself. And she clearly wanted to do that as well. And I've never heard anyone, I think it was Alex Salmond quoted just now saying that the establishment was out to get her. I just think that's a sort of piece of, with respect to him, a sort of cheap tabloid commentary. I think people wanted her to be able to fulfil herself. The awful truth now is that we will never know what kind of fulfilment she might have found.
Do you get any sense that the Prince was pleased about the Princess's relationship with Dodi Fayed?
I know nothing about that at all.
OK, Jonathan Dimbleby, thank you very much indeed. A reminder that we've broken into the regular schedules for this special programme on Diana, Princess of Wales, who was killed in a car crash in Paris early this morning. She and her friend Dodi Fayed were being pursued by photographers on motorbikes when their car crashed into a tunnel alongside the River Seine shortly after midnight. Surgeons at a Paris hospital tried to stem internal bleeding in her chest but couldn't restart her heart. They declared her dead at 3 a.m. British time. Dodi Fayed died at the scene. Well, our reporter Helen Wright is at the Princess's London home, Kensington Palace. Helen, quite a scene behind you there.
Indeed, yes, there are people, as you can see, queuing to lay flowers here behind me. Within the last hour, the number of bouquets that have been brought here has increased massively. I mean, the flowers now cover about 30 feet of the pavement outside the palace, and they're literally piled on top of each other. I mean, messages vary. One says, "Your legend lives on as Queen of our hearts." Another, "The world will never be the same without you." And I can see a bouquet just to my right here, a part of all of us has died with you. Real sorrow, a real depth of emotion being shown here today.
Helen, has there been any reaction from members of her staff there?
I haven't seen any members of her staff either coming or going from the palace today. There are signs of activity within the palace, but I imagine they're all very much keeping to themselves today, keeping quiet, trying to come to terms with the news themselves.
Helen Wrights at Kensington Palace, thank you very much indeed. Well, Susie Parsons, the chief executive of the London Lighthouse charity, the country's biggest project for people with the HIV virus, and a special concern of Princess Diana's, is with us now. Well, Susie Parsons, as we said, they're a special concern of Princess Diana's. You must have worked with her closely over the years.
Absolutely. She's been a terrific friend and supporter to London Lighthouse, both at the level of doing public things for us. For example, she came to launch our capital appeal for more money to extend our building just last October, but also, and probably more importantly, a very great friend to many of the people who use our services, who've got to know her on a very informal basis over the years when she's come on private visits.
And we've been talking over the course of the morning of her effect on people. When she walked into a room where some terribly sick people were, how did they react and how did she react?
Well, it was quite extraordinary. I've never seen anybody with such an ability to create a rapport with people so quickly. I mean, she could come into a group of people who are perhaps a bit nervous about meeting a real princess, all the glitz and the glamour and all that, and within a couple of seconds she'd have them relaxed and laughing and joking. And the one thing I would say is that whenever she came, we always had a lot of fun. You know, it wasn't a very solemn occasion. It was always great fun, and that's how we'll remember her.
And she also, in the early days of the discovery of the AIDS virus, she made a big breakthrough, didn't she, just in holding people, in touching them?
Absolutely. There was, in the early days, there was a lot of fear and prejudice and discrimination against people with the HIV virus around, and you can't underestimate the impact that the Princess of Wales sitting on somebody's bed and holding their hand had in terms of dispelling that the myths around AIDS and the fear and the prejudice. I mean, it was just an overwhelming effect on public opinion, but also for, as I say, what we will remember is the effect that she had on the individuals who she came into contact with, who she just gave so much caring and love and support to. And I hope too that she got something out of her visits to us. I'm sure that she did, and that she drew strength from the rapport that she had with the people who use our services.
And it goes without saying this news will come as an enormous shock to the people that work on the Lighthouse project.
Terrible, terrible, terrible shock. We were expecting her, in fact, to come for a private visit the week after next, which would never have gone into the press or on the television. Now, obviously, that won't happen, and it's terrible to think not only that she won't be coming in a few days, as we were expecting, but that she won't be coming ever again. It really is devastating.
Is it, though, an important part of her legacy that your work continues, that your efforts are redoubled almost?
Absolutely. I'm sure that she would want us to carry on and to do as much as possible to support people with HIV and AIDS and to help them to live well and to die well, because that was very, very close to her heart.
Susie Parsons, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
A reminder that we've broken into the regular schedules to bring you this special programme on Diana, Princess of Wales, who was killed in a car crash in Paris early this morning. She and her friend Dodi Fayed were being pursued by photographers on motorbikes when their car crashed into a tunnel alongside the River Seine shortly after midnight. The princess died in a Paris hospital from severe internal bleeding. Dodi Fayed died at the scene of the accident. Caroline Kerr reports on the night's terrible events.
It was here, in an underground tunnel alongside the River Seine, that the fatal accident occurred in the early hours of this morning. The Mercedes in which the princess had been travelling with Dodi Fayed was wrecked beyond recognition. It had veered out of control as it entered the tunnel, apparently travelling at high speed. Police said they believed the car was being pursued by photographers when the crash happened. In spite of the efforts of the emergency services, Mr. Fayed died at the scene of the crash along with his driver. The princess was treated by paramedics at the crash site and then taken to hospital.
When she arrived at the hospital, she was already suffering hemorrhaging in the thorax. Then she suffered a stroke. The lung vein was badly injured, despite the care and the heart massage, which was administered for 2 hours.
The British ambassador, who was also at the hospital, confirmed the tragic news.
Tonight's accident is a terrible tragedy. The death of the Princess of Wales fills us all with deep shock and with deep grief. And our thoughts and our prayers are with her family and her friends, and with the family and friends of the others who died in the accident.
At the scene of the crash, French police seized a number of motorcycles. 7 photographers, all apparently French, were arrested. They're being questioned at the city's crime squad headquarters as witnesses to the accident. No charges have been pressed as yet. As the wreckage of the princess's car was towed away in the early hours of this morning, the French Interior Minister paid tribute to Diana, a woman whom he said was well loved in France and who will be greatly missed. Outside the British Embassy in Paris, the Union Jack was flying at half-mast, as Paris and the rest of the world wakes up to the news that Diana, Princess of Wales, died here last night. Caroline Kerr, ITN.
And we've got some news just in. The Prince of Wales, it has been confirmed, will fly to Paris later today to accompany the body of Diana, Princess of Wales, back to the UK. Buckingham Palace has just announced that. Well, Nicholas Owen is with me. Nick, that will be an awful journey for Prince Charles.
Well, it will be an absolutely ghastly journey, won't it? What can one say about it, except that it does show that the Queen said that, that after the divorce, the Princess of Wales was to be regarded as a member of the royal family still, and here they are according her the full privilege or honour or whatever you like in death of being accompanied back by her former husband. But it is going to be an agonising trip for him. It's going to be by far the most difficult task to confront him, certainly. And I think, you know, one must be careful of exaggeration in these occasions because history sometimes catches us out, but I think this is the biggest disaster to befall the British royal family, well, shall we say this century. I think it makes the abdication look pretty sort of unimportant in many ways. So that is going to be a terrible journey for him, as you say. And we were talking earlier about this business of the funeral and so on. It's likely to be, I would reckon, about a week away, and it will probably take the form of a service at Westminster Abbey, and then the Princess of Wales will be interred at Windsor, St George's Chapel, Windsor, to lie alongside other senior members of the royal family. That is unless, on the very outside chance, that a young woman in the prime of life with everything to live for had actually expressed a wish to go somewhere else. I very much doubt that. And everybody I've spoken to, had a chance to talk to on this matter this morning, is pretty sure that that form will be followed, and that's how things will be. This country is going to go through that period of mourning. It could last, 7, 8, 9 days, I would imagine, probably over next weekend. And I think, the scenes we've seen this morning at Kensington Palace and Buckingham Palace is just the beginning. And I think everybody is going to be so stunned. And here we are with football matches being cancelled. And whoever remembers, really, in a sort of recent lifetime, not only that happening, but of course that did happen at the time when King George VI died, 1952. But he was a man, in his 50s and so on, and a sick man, clearly. Here is a stunning blow out of the blue, robbing this country of this brilliant star.
We've been talking a lot about the effect on the royal family. There is, of course, Diana's side of the family.
Yes, there is very much so, them to consider as well.
Quite an impact on them.
Oh, of course it will be. It has to be remembered that Diana's early life was very much conditioned by parents' divorce, and a lot of people have said, playing amateur psychiatrist, as everybody's inclined to do, that this explained a lot of her own sort of insecurities and discomfort in life. But it was a close family, there's no doubt about that. My brother recently has been out in South Africa, and he has had his problems there, and with his own marriage and so on. But yes, one must pause and think so much of their grief as well. And do you remember back at the wedding in 1981, the way that the royal family, this terribly grand bunch of people, embraced Diana's family as well at the time of the wedding, and they were allowed to play their full part, particularly her father accompanying his that fairy tale bride up the aisle. I'm sure that will happen again now that every opportunity will be afforded for them to play their full part in the dreadfully sad events that will come in the next week or so.
After her divorce, did she in a way get closer to her mother?
I don't really think she did, no, to be honest. I mean, it's very difficult to know what Diana did do. She was desperately lonely at times, and this is why Dodie Fired, and perhaps there have been other chaps as well, but certainly Dodie Fired came as such a great thing for her. She was a very lonely woman at times. Christmas Day, you know, there was a time when just after her divorce she still went up to Sandringham and joined the royal family there for Christmas. And then in the afternoon she went back on her own to Kensington Palace, and she sat and watched, I think it's the bumper edition of, is it EastEnders or one of those soaps that she was keen on, just like so many people in this country are. And, you know, she said to me, she told me the story as well, she said, I sat there and watched it, and you said, oh, well, I say, ma'am, that was a bit miserable for you. Were you on your own? Yes, completely alone. There was that most adored of women, this most photographed of women, this most cherished of women in so many other ways, and such a person, and yet on Christmas Day in the afternoon she was at her lowest and loneliest. There was an awful lot of that. I think she found it jolly difficult to establish any rapport with anybody, really. We've got some more pictures now of the Princess of Wales. Let's have a look at these. Oh yes, now this was after her first holiday with Dodie Fired.
So this is when, last month?
Yeah, that's right. And she came back, and this was at Northwick Park, I think, hospital, and it was a cancer charity for children, and there she is, dazzling away in a super frock, that wonderful gown. And she wore clothes so very well, didn't she? And everybody looking on, and she relaxed and smiling away there. She was obviously very, very happy at that time. I mean, people did comment on that, and it has to be said that people said, well, there seems to be a man in her life who's important. And, well, again, what a wonderfully human thing that was. And that was absolutely super, you know. She's done terribly well.
Was he, in a sense, Mr. Right?
Was he Mr. Right, did you say? Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure she'd reached the point of knowing that, you know. I'm just not sure that she did. She knew whether that was so or not. I think a lot of people felt that she was in the early stages of that relationship. She'd had to endure, you know, the problems of having a former girlfriend come out of the woodwork and say, oh, he promised to marry me and all of that. But she did. She endured all that. You know, has got on with the relationship. It looked as though that was the thing that mattered so very, very much to her. And now she and the man she seemed to have come to love have perished together in these appallingly tragic circumstances that we're discussing now.
We also ought to remember that the Al-Fayed family have been bereaved.
Yes.
Mohammed Al-Fayed has lost his eldest son, Dodie Fired.
And he said, didn't he, that this was a most appalling thing, and what he described as a thoroughly needless death, referring, of course, to the pursuit by paparazzi which caused the accident. Yes, of course, the Al-Fayed family in deep mourning as well.
OK, Nick, thank you very much indeed for the time being. Our political correspondent, Tom Bradby, is in Downing Street now. Tom, any more reaction from there?
No, there's been no further reaction since the Prime Minister made his statement outside the church in Sedgefield this morning. Many people, of course, will have listened to that. He was clearly very moved, his voice breaking with emotion. I think the real question here is starting to become this whole question of privacy again. I was listening to what Bill Neely was saying there earlier about what actually happened, the tragic events themselves in that tunnel. It's obviously too early to say exactly what happened, but a lot of people here are starting to discuss the question of whether she was pursued, whether they were trying to get away from the paparazzi. This government, of course, prides itself on responding very quickly to public demand, so I think it's a racing certainty that there's going to be some kind of review, and we've already had Mr. Cook's comments this morning suggesting that they were going to look very closely at the question of whether the aggressive pursuit of this car did contribute to the accident. So I think we're going to go over that debate again. And referring back to conversations I might have had in the past with senior politicians, I'm not sure this whole question of the fact that the Princess sometimes used the media or sometimes wanted media attention is going to hold much weight with them. I think they're going to be concentrating much more closely on the fact that she was hounded day after day after day. And I think from now on the debate is likely to be anchored by these tragic events. I think in the past people have looked at the downside of legislation, the whole question of dampening down legitimate journalistic inquiry, if you like. But from now on, the debate is obviously going to be anchored by this, and people are going to look at it, and they're going to look at the future, for example, with Prince William, and say, look, we just can't have this in the future. We've got to change the law in some way.
Yes, indeed, Tom. Clearly, these are questions that will be looked into over the course of time. But more immediately, what happens to political life now? We heard from Mike Brunson that possibly campaigning in the devolution referendums will be suspended. The House isn't sitting at the moment, but in a way politics seem irrelevant after an incident like this.
I think that's absolutely right. The whole question of the referendum is a difficult one because, of course, it's a very controversial subject in itself. I mean, the essence of politics is controversy. That's not for 10 days or so, so it's not quite clear what decision will be taken about that. But obviously, Downing Street are faced, at the moment, everyone is so shocked by what's happened. It's very difficult to make sensible decisions about what's going to go on. It doesn't seem as if Parliament itself is going to be recalled, but it's very hard to say at this stage.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. Now we are crossing to Balmoral, where the royal family got the terrible news overnight. The Queen and Prince Philip are expected to be driving across this bridge shortly, going to attend a service at Crathy Church, a small church just a few hundred yards from the main gates of Balmoral. There you see the crowds gathering in very sombre mood indeed. The Queen and Prince Philip, we're told, wanted to continue with this service as planned. It's not expected that Prince Charles and Princes William and Harry will be going to the service. We will come back to this as and when the Queen and Prince Philip arrive. Well, let's go now to Buckingham Palace. Tim Hewitt is there. The crowds are gathering. Tim, a sombre mood?
Yes, indeed, Dermot. In fact, as you can see, since you last joined us here, the crowd has got large to the extent now that we're almost completely surrounded. They are, in fact, changing the guard at Buckingham Palace at the moment, as normal. And, of course, a lot of the people who are here would have been here for that anyway. But there's been a great outpouring of grief here this morning. Dozens, scores of bouquets of flowers, probably hundreds by now. I haven't been over to the main gates for 20 or 30 minutes, but huge amounts of flowers left at the front gates of Buckingham Palace, and as you say, a very sombre mood. We're still awaiting word from inside the palace, from the Lord Chamberlain's office, as to what funeral arrangements are going to be made and so forth, and that is going to come, we expect, later on today. But for the moment, a very large and a very sombre crowd here.
Tim, you talked earlier about a slight hostility from some quarters of the crowd towards the press, clearly after the events in Paris. Is that still apparent in any way?
I'm sorry, Dermot, I couldn't hear you. Could you
Tim,
repeat that?
actually, we do want to cut out of you anyway. We want to go straight to Balmoral, where we are still waiting for the Queen and Prince Philip to arrive at Crathy Church for the morning service there. Nicholas Owen is with me in the studio. Nick, you know this area quite well. You know the church.
The Balmoral, the gate of Balmoral is just to the right as you look at that picture behind the blue sign. They come across this little bridge over the River Dee, idyllic setting, and we now, with a bit of luck, will be able to show you. Yeah, there you are. There's the sign that says River Dee quite clearly. Another TV cameraman across the road, and here they come. This will be the.
They'll be in the third car there. And there indeed the Queen and Prince Philip sitting bolt upright.
They go up the road there, a little turning across a main road, and then up that little hill to the little Crathy Church, just out of sight round the top of that round the hill there. Crowd there watching them as they go and pray, and
prayers, no doubt, being said,
and many thoughts, obviously, of what has gone before.
Well, there was a glimpse of our correspondent there, David Rose. But let's talk first with Nicholas Owen with me in the studio. Important that the show must go on in a way for the Queen and Prince Philip.
Well, yes, that is certainly true as well, Dan. I mean, this, you know, the tide of events sweeps on, as we said before, and of course there will be the business of the funeral and so on, the prayers, and today, and then the funeral to come, and all the arrangements for that and everything else. And in the middle of all of that, somewhere, those two lads who are back, as far as we know, in Balmoral digesting the news, and then their father off today, as we've said. He is going apparently to Paris, and we have an official sources in Paris say that the Princess of Wales, Diana, Princess of Wales's body, will come back to this country this very day, later on, presumably this afternoon.
Just continuing on that service, if it goes as scheduled, how long does the service last?
The church service there at Crathy? Oh, 3/4 of an hour. So perhaps David Rose, our correspondent there, can give us a clearer picture on that.
David Rose up at Balmoral. Can you answer that question for us? Do we know how long the church service is likely to last?
If it's a normal Sunday morning service in Scotland, I would expect it to last about an hour. I did incidentally see, because I gave you wrong information in the first piece I did from here, I did see Prince William in the car. We were led to believe that the princes would be staying with their father in Balmoral. In the brief seconds as they went past, it wasn't possible to see everybody, but I can confirm that Prince William at least was there, and I suspect Prince Harry was as well.
And any information about what happens after the service?
Very vague information indeed. A lot of rumours that Prince Charles may be leaving, may have left already to go to Paris, but quite honestly we're getting very little information.
David, thank you very much indeed. Well, the Harrods boss, Mohammed Al Fayed, said the death of his eldest son and the princess had been an appalling and quite needless tragedy. He pointed the finger of blame for their death directly at the press photographers who'd been pursuing them. He said Dodi had been a kind, gentle and decent person who'd had a tremendous regard for Princess Diana. Mark Webster now reports.
Heir to the Harrods empire, Dodi Fayed found himself the subject of intense media interest as soon as his relationship with Diana became public. Until then, his reputation had been that of a millionaire playboy who dated a string of glamorous women. But he was also playing an increasingly important part in the running of the Harrods business. He was seen by his father as the natural successor to the highly successful empire he'd built up. Mohammed Al Fayed had long been a close friend and confidant of Diana, and had apparently encouraged the growing friendship with his son. Frequently a controversial figure, Mohammed Al Fayed and his brother Ali had come from humble beginnings in Egypt to take charge of Britain's most famous store. Recently, Mohammed had been embroiled in the Cash for Questions row and had earlier fought for the right to become a British citizen, something he'd been denied. But the media interest in his son had also focused attention on a previous romance with former model Kelly Fisher, who alleged she'd been engaged to Dodi at the time he began his relationship with Diana. Today the flag was flying at half-mast over the Harrods department store at Knightsbridge as the Al Fayed family tried to come to terms with the deaths of those they loved. Mark Webster, ITN.
Well, Nicholas Owen is with me in the studio, our royal correspondent. Nick, we've seen scenes from Kensington Palace, from Buckingham Palace, from Balmoral.
Yes.
Crowds gathering outside
Yes.
them all, flowers piling up. There's Buckingham Palace there.
Yeah.
An enormous outpouring of grief.
Well, I think there is. I mean, the thing that strikes me about those pictures, Dermot, is that crowd is unusually still. Really, you know, it's not sort of, there's not the usual hubbub, it doesn't seem to me. There's been the changing of the guard there this morning, which always does attract a crowd, but there's no doubt at all that an awful lot of people will just feel that they want to be there at this particular time.
The news of this enormity does, of course, take a while to sink in.
Oh, I think the disbelief that most people will feel is just sort of total, really. It's isn't it like, surely, losing a member of one's own family? I mean, you have to say that this is the sort of impact that the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, has had and will have as people get to hear about the information.
There is also, as we were discussing earlier, anger as well.
Well, there is. This business of the paparazzi. We know that they're in the crowd this morning. There were people being pretty cross about the press, and you know, cameramen and photographers and so on were you know, not exactly the targets of criticism, but there was a bit of hostility towards them.
Well, Nick, we've got some more information just in. Viscount Althorp, Diana's brother, had this to say a few moments ago.
It was with profound shock and subsequent death in Paris early this morning. All those who've come into contact with Diana, particularly over the past 17 years, will share my family's grief. She was unique. She understood the most precious needs of human beings, particularly those that suffered. And her vibrancy and sparkle, combined with a very real sense of duty, are now gone forever. It is heartbreaking to lose such a human being, especially when she was only 36. This is not a time for recriminations, but for sadness. However, I would say that I always believed the press would kill her in the end. But not even I could imagine that they would take such a direct hand in her death, as seems to be the case. It would appear that every proprietor and editor of every publication that has paid for intrusive and exploitative photographs of her, encouraging greedy and ruthless individuals to risk everything in pursuit of Diana's image, has blood on his hands today. My heart goes out to the families of the others killed in this incident. Above all, my thoughts are with William and Harry, and with my mother and 2 sisters, who are showing tremendous bravery in the face of senseless tragedy. I would ask you please, at this time, to respect the fact that Diana was part of a family, and amongst the general mourning at her death, realise that we too need space to pay our final respects to our own flesh and blood. For that, we will need privacy. Finally, the one consolation is that Diana is now in a place where no human being can ever touch her again. I pray that she rests in peace. Thank you.
Viscount Althorp there, Diana's brother, clearly very, very angry indeed, pointing the finger of blame firmly at the press. He said the press killed his sister in the end. Well, news of Diana's death was first released this morning by the Press Association here in London, and for many years Tom Corby was their court correspondent and royal expert, and he's with us now. Viscount Althorp, angry, pointing the finger of blame very clearly at the press.
Very emotional, and he probably feels it's very justified, because it was. Diana had a love-hate relationship with the media, almost a schizophrenic relationship, obviously. I felt very sad this morning. I went all around the world with her, and now there's this huge void, but what he said was highly emotive, but there is a grain of truth in it. I wouldn't say they killed her, but...
Well, with some of those newspaper editors that the Viscount was fulminating about, will they take any of that on board?
One would hope so. Obviously, there's going to be a huge debate now. I mean, the whole question of privacy and media intrusion is going to be very, very high on the horizon.
How is it possible to judge, I suppose, but Nicholas Owen, the royal correspondent, and I were speculating earlier about just how big a story is this in terms of royal reporting. You've been reporting for many years. This is...
Enormous, enormous. I know if I'd doing my old job, I would have had to have wings on my heels, as it were. Yes, an enormous story, but what a tragic end. I mean, snuffed out like that. Very much lived her life in the spotlight, died in the spotlight. Strange lady in many ways, very attractive personality. One half of her very reserved, almost reticent, the other half seeking publicity. Of course, she was beautiful, and she liked to be photographed. Doesn't any beautiful woman? My sympathy goes to the Prince of Wales and the boys. I mean, God, what father has to break that news? That must have been terrible.
Did you get to know the princess at all?
In a professional way. I mean, I covered virtually everything she did for almost 8 years, wherever she was in the world. And yeah, she was always devastatingly charming, very, very nice. And she made my life much easier by reacting and responding.
Did you abide, though, by any unofficial rules? Were there things that you wouldn't report on, or places you wouldn't go?
PA court correspondent had a strange job. You were in and out of the palace all the time. You didn't have to give any official undertaking about doing anything, about not doing anything, other than they said, well, report the truth and don't write flyers if you're not sure about them. In return for that, you were first with the big ones, the engagements, the deaths, the divorces, the separations. It was a strange job, but very exciting. And yes, she was very much, so much part of it. The pivotal part of it for so long.
Will the effect be? We've been talking about the intrusion, talking about the role of the paparazzi in her death. Do you think we will end up with some kind of privacy rules, regulations, even a law?
Well, this is a catalyst, isn't it? It's going to spark off this huge debate. We might. But I think I'd be totally against it, because as a journalist, it would hamper a free press, and anybody who's worked in a country where there isn't a free press. I always make this point. These people who talk about privacy laws work in a country where there isn't a free press.
But it does seem, doesn't it, that time and again the press have tried to, or the royals have tried to do deals with the press. We'll let you take a photograph of us here if you leave us alone for the rest of our holiday. But time and again, and especially in the princess's case, the press just couldn't resist it. They couldn't leave her alone. She was too good a story. The pictures were too good.
I don't think so much it was the national newspapers or the staff reporters or the staff photographers. The Paps, of course, had an entirely different role. And there was an entirely.
But isn't that slightly disingenuous of them? Because after all, the tabloids would buy the pictures from the paparazzi and print them, and they'd say, they could hold their hands up and say it wasn't our photographers.
All I can talk of is the actual pack itself. I mean, they were known as the Rat Pack, but they were full of very genuine people, and they treated her with respect, I think. There's a great difference between, and also a great difference between the British Paps and the foreign Paps. The foreign Paps are dealing with a star. It could be Nicole Kidman, Tom Cruise, anybody. Our Paps were dealing with a member of the royal family, albeit in the last couple of years a semi-detached member. So there was still that restraint, in my view. I don't know whether Nick agrees. I mean, he's been around on this and he knows as well as I do. But there was still a degree of restraint with our paparazzi. And they knew her so well, and she knew them. OK, there were spats. But...
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Tom Corby. We're going now to Washington. Our correspondent there, John Irvine. John, has the news struck America? What's the reaction?
Well, of course, millions of Americans are just waking up to this news. Millions of others know about it already. That's because the American television networks have been running this story all night, breaking into normal scheduling. That's because Princess Diana was so popular here. She was idolised by the Americans. No other member of the British royal family came close. The President and Mrs. Clinton are said to be deeply upset by news of her death. They're on holiday on Martha's Vineyard, of course, at the moment. We're told they were attending a party last night when news of the Paris accident came through. We're also told that they embraced one another and left the party quickly after that. The Clintons have released a statement. The President has extended his sympathy and that of his wife to the Princess's family, her friends, and especially to her two sons.
The Princess did seem to form quite a relationship with the Clintons. She got on very well with Hillary Clinton, of course.
Yes, of course, with not just the Clintons, but the entire American people, it seems. For them, for many of them, she was the most glamorous person in the world. They had a long-term love affair with Princess Diana. They admired her for her chic, her style, and of course for her compassion, her sympathy and the common touch that she possessed. I think it's fair to say that the American people would have adopted Princess Diana if they could have. There was a genuine wish, a hope here that if she had ever chosen to leave the United Kingdom, she would have come here to the United States. People greatly admired her work for humanitarian causes, the work she did on behalf of AIDS sufferers, and of course more recently she championed the cause for a worldwide ban on landmines. She discussed that very subject with Hillary Clinton when she was here in Washington in June. Mrs. Clinton said afterwards that the discussion had helped persuade the President to look at the whole issue of landmines once again. I think people here genuinely trusted the Princess. There were no doubts about her. There were very few skeptics here. People trusted her sincerity. They believed that she tried to use her privilege and her position to do good.
Was there a sense of puzzlement in America about the way the Princess was treated by her own press, the British press?
Yes, I think there was. There's no tabloid press as such. There are no tabloid everyday newspapers here. And people just didn't quite understand why there were these doubts about the Princess of Wales. There was a great sympathy for her. I have to say she was something of a Jackie O type figure. People recognised that she had suffered during her life. She'd endured some sadness, but people admired her feisty spirit and the way that she came through. I have to say also that people here did not regard her relationship with Dodi Fayed as any kind of scandal. People here wanted her to be happy.
John Irvine in Washington, thank you very much indeed. I'm now being told we have a statement from William Hague, the leader of the Conservative Party. Let's cross there now.
And I think we should all recognise this morning that she did a great deal of good. We should pay tribute to the tremendous work that she did for homeless people, for young people, for people suffering from drugs or AIDS. She did a tremendous amount of good work for the arts as well. And we should salute that and remember that. She was a shining spirit who will never be forgotten in this country. It's one of those times now at which politicians of all parties pull together and forget our differences for a while, for an appropriate period. And in the light of that, I am cancelling my trip to Scotland, which would have begun today, to campaign in the devolution referendum. It's a time for all politicians to bury our differences for a while.
How long do you think that suspension of campaigning should go on for?
Well, I don't know. That depends on the arrangements for the funeral and so on. So I can't say. But I do think it would be inappropriate for me to set out on a campaigning trip to Scotland today. So as an initial step, I have cancelled that.
Mr. Hague, may I ask you what your most vivid personal memory of Princess Diana is?
Well, she was just an extremely warm person who really was interested in people. And really always let people feel that she was interested in them. It wasn't just an act, she was really passionately concerned about people. The work that she did for so many charitable causes did actually reflect a genuine human warmth and compassion and interest. She had a lot of love for people, and that came through. So, as I say, she was a shining spirit, and she'll never be forgotten.
And do you think it's too early to say, in your view, whether lessons can be learned from this about the way that the press and media behave?
I think it is too early to say. We will all want to ask questions. We will all want to know exactly what has happened, but we don't know. And I think it's too early to start having a debate about the law. This is a day of national sadness and reflection, and we should take the time to do that. Thank you very much.
Conservative leader William Hague there paying his own tribute to Princess Diana, the Princess of Wales, at his constituency in North Yorkshire, and also confirming that his party will be suspending campaigning in the Scottish referendum polls. Well, as we reported earlier, French surgeons fought for 2 hours to try to save Princess Diana, but were unable to stem the internal bleeding in her chest. British medical experts say everything was done that could have been done, and it would have been impossible to keep her alive. Chris Roberts has our report.
One look at the twisted remains of the princess's car, and it's obvious the extent of the injuries caused in the accident were massive. Bleeding profusely in the chest area, Diana was transported to a local Paris hospital, where doctors operated, then applied heart massage for 2 hours. It was all in vain, however, and the princess's death was officially recorded. Physicians in Britain believe French doctors could do little to save a patient with extensive injuries.
The surgeon at the Paris hospital would have been presented with someone with severe breathing difficulties, a very low blood pressure, and probably a heart which wasn't working effectively. And so he would have had major problems in trying to resuscitate someone as badly as injured as that.
So really the chances for the princess were slim?
Very, very slim. It was almost a no-win situation, I would have thought.
Armed police are now guarding the hospital where the body of the princess lies. It will be flown back to Britain later this afternoon. Chris Roberts, ITN.
Well, Dr. Tim Coates, an accident and emergency specialist from the London Helicopter Emergency Medical Service, is with me in the studio now. Dr. Coates, presumably in France they follow similar procedures to here. How would your service have reacted in the event of a similar accident?
I think in a very similar way to the French. The French pre-hospital system is called SAMU. That is quite a sophisticated system. They have a series of doctors in land ambulances so that they can provide a doctor at an incident scene both during the day and at night. The service that I work with provides that sort of specialist intervention early on during daylight hours, and in the UK at night we have a system of general practitioners in an organisation called BASICS, which can provide a medical response to this sort of incident.
In such serious incidents, time presumably is of the essence.
Time is very important, and it's important to get the patient to specialist care as quickly as possible. The problem is that if the patient is trapped in the car for a period of time, in this case perhaps several hours, then it is very difficult to move the patient to the hospital, so you've got to move the specialist care to the patient's side.
So what can be done? Presumably depends on the state of the crash and the state of the victim, but what can be done at the scene?
At the scene, it's very important that the fire brigade work very closely with the medical teams so that you get a combined medical and physical rescue going on in a coordinated fashion. If you put the right medical team at the patient's side, then you can perform at the accident scene most of the procedures that you would perform in a hospital resuscitation room.
And are the emergency services well rehearsed at working in unison here? There would have been the police there, the fire brigade there, the ambulance service. They all know exactly what to do and save those vital seconds.
Yes, and if anything, the French system is more integrated between those different services than the system that we've got in the UK.
Why is that?
Because they're really working under the same organisation and controlled by the same organisation, that the paramedics there are part of the fire service. Whereas in the UK we have to have sort of regular training between the different services to enable that sort of cooperation.
Dr. Tim Coates, thank you very much indeed for that.
Thank you.
Well, on the phone now is the Reverend John Hawthorne from St Mary the Virgin Church near the Prince of Wales home at Highgrove in Gloucestershire. The Princess was an occasional worshipper there. Dr. Hawthorne, your memories of the Princess?
As a very lovely person, and we have treated her death here with enormous sadness and shock. My own particular memory of her is of a wedding a few years ago when I came out of church after the wedding, and standing on the corner, leaning on the wall with one of her boys on either hand, and all three of them sucking ice creams. She was there like any other young mum with her children, watching the bride come out. I think that's how probably most of us around here will remember her, as someone, as part of the town, part of the family, someone who went into the local shops, who waved to the local people, and was very much loved and indeed respected and adored, really.
How has it affected members of your congregation?
There was a great sadness this morning. I mean, we had 2 services this morning, as usual. There was a great sadness among them, and normally after a service we serve coffee, which we did this morning, but then there's usually quite a buzz. But there was none of that buzz this morning. Everyone, I think, was utterly shocked and staggered, because it is a great tragedy. And it's just, if you like, the culmination of so many tragedies that have happened to the family and to the Princess in particular. And so our prayers went to the family, to the Prince and to the boys. And as we began our services with a few moments of silence, commending her soul to God and praying for the family.
Have you any plans to hold a special service?
I haven't thought that far ahead yet at all, no. I mean, the whole thing came as such a shock, and as I say, I've had 2 services this morning, and this is really as far as my thinking has gone. But I've got no thought about that one yet.
Reverend John Hawthorne at St Mary's Church in Gloucestershire. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's get the latest from Kensington Palace, the Princess's London home. Helen Wright is there. Helen, what's happening? Hello, Helen. I don't know if you're hearing me.
Hello, yes.
Hello, yes. I see an enormous pile of flowers there building up behind you.
That's right. For the past 6 hours, people have been bringing flowers here and still are doing. As you can see, the bouquets, hundreds of them, now cover almost the entire pavement outside the palace here. I can see messages. One says simply, "Goodbye, friend." Another, "You were a wonderful, shining example to us all." And another I can see right down at the far end of this huge mountain of flowers. "Free at last, my Diana's free at last," echoing the sentiments expressed by the Princess's brother months ago when he said, "Where she is now, nobody can hurt her."
Helen Wright at Kensington Palace, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's now go to ITN's own newsroom, where Mark Webster has been monitoring the enormous amounts of information, the tributes that have been pouring in from all over the world. Over to you, Mark.
Well, as you rightly say, and the tributes have been pouring in from absolutely everywhere. We have confirmation that today's Premiership match between Liverpool and Newcastle Anfield is going to be called off as a mark of respect, but the personal tributes are obviously pouring in for her as well. There's one from Jemima Khan, as you remember, the daughter of the late Jimmy Goldsmith. She was saying she was very close to Diana. She was an amazing and remarkable woman, a loyal friend and a genuine crusader who did a great deal for others. It's a tremendous loss to the nation, but, and I think this reflects the views that have been expressed by just about everybody. Above all, she says, my thoughts and prayers are with her family, and especially with her 2 sons, who've lost a wonderful mother whom they both adored. Now, we do have confirmation, too, that the royal party, the Queen Mother, Duke of Edinburgh, the Prince of Wales, and both his sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, have arrived at church. They are at church now, near Balmoral. We also have confirmation of how the news of Diana's death was broken to her mother, Frances Shan Kidd, because, as we've heard, a lot of sympathy for the royal family, but of course other families have been very badly touched by today's terrible news. She was actually in discussion with her local parish priest, Father Sean Macaulay, from St Columba's Cathedral, and he said after he talked to her, he said, I phoned Frances at 4 a.m. and Frances told me that Diana had been killed. She heard about it and then told me she had her friends with her who'd driven down during the night to be with her. A mother losing her child is a terrible thing, said her parish priest. I don't know how she feels. I had 1 minute speaking to her, but she said, the death of a child knows no words, we can say, that will ever comfort a parent. So it can only be compared to Our Lady losing her child, Jesus. Now, as I say, from all around the world, from all around the globe, there have been endless tributes pouring into her, both, as I think has been said frequently, about her enormous good work, but also about her extraordinary personality, and the way that she did manage to touch the lives of so very many people during her time and her work for charity.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Well, David and Elizabeth Emanuel, who designed Diana's wedding dress, join us now in the studio. You dealt with a very young, a very nervous 19-year-old princess, Lady Di as she then was. What are your memories of her during that period?
We saw her at the very beginning, almost, well, before it was announced that she was actually going to get engaged to Prince Charles. So I suppose we're in the privileged position of seeing a young kindergarten teacher working with her at that stage, through the announcement, through the wedding day and onwards. So we saw this kindergarten teacher woman emerge into a woman known around the world.
Elizabeth Emanuel, just give us a sense of the excitement, the anticipation that was surrounding that whole royal wedding that really pulled the nation together, didn't it?
I think it was a transformation, because when we met her, she was a nursery school teacher, and she was just so sweet and nice and kind of just like anybody else. And then 1 minute she was like that, and the next minute she was transformed into the most famous woman in the world. And it was magical, those moments, and we were very privileged to have been part of all of that. And it was also a wonderful time, and we've got just incredible memories. She was just so much like an ordinary, lovely, nice person, and very kind to David and myself, and it's just come as such a terrible shock for us.
I believe we have found some pictures of that dress, the wedding dress, which is now an exhibition somewhere, isn't it?
It's actually at the moment it's in Kensington Palace. It's hers. It's her property. If you remember when she did the big sale for the AIDS benefit, rumoured when she auctioned off her gowns, and it was speculated whether this would actually be up for auction. But no, it's in her private keep. You have to remember that day. It was wonderful. People were so excited. People wanted it to be a joyous occasion. And Elizabeth at the time had promised to make her, a romantic fairy tale bride. And so many memories. One of them, she took the trouble to write a little hand note, on her honeymoon, and to phone us and to say thank you so much.
She clearly loved the dress.
Yes, and I will always remember as full of life. Full of life. She was a great wit. She was always cracking jokes and was sweet, had so much energy. And what was wonderful, she was just so much giving. When you think of all the love she's given to the people around the world.
So what were those fittings like? As the princess came in, you were sticking the pins in the dress and the rest.
Well, it was just a very excited teenager, wasn't it? She was terribly excited and very, very much in love. And it was fun, and she kept it fun. We were young designers, she was young, and it was a moment where quite clearly the scale of the gown we could not fit in our tiny showroom. So I said to her, well, we haven't got any room. What can we, you know, can we do it at your place? And she said, I better ask. So we ended up doing this extraordinary fitting, sealing off an entire floor Buckingham Palace, which had never been done before. And she said, do you think it's okay? And I said, I think you look great. And always caring, always taking the trouble to say thank you, you know, which is very unusual, because a lot of people, you know, when they're in that privileged position of having something wonderfully made, people take it very much for granted and don't say please and don't say thank you, but she did.
So very warm, very natural, very welcoming, Elizabeth Emanuel.
I remember, do you remember when we were in Clarence's house and we were all there and she was getting dressed ready for the wedding and we were watching the crowds on the television? And she was looking, it was kind of like amazement, because all these people come to see her, and I think it was just then sinking in, really, what her life was going to be about, that she was going to be a very much public person belonging to the people, and I'll just always remember that day.
But having been the foremost fashion icon in the entire world, I'm pleased to say, and I think she superseded that, didn't she? And she's now...
Sorry to interrupt you here, but apparently the Prime Minister is just coming out from the church service he has been attending at his Sedgefield constituency. He spoke earlier before he went in. I think there's going to be no statement from the Prime Minister now. There he is, ushering his family into the car. Then we're told it's back to Chequers, and clearly moved Mr Blair when we heard his statement before he went into the church. Spoke very much from the heart, off the cuff, about the Princess of Wales that he'd come to know, both as Prime Minister and as a friend. He said he was utterly devastated. Yes, Mr Blair and